At the end of part 1, there is a moment that seems like a turning point. Tim Bergling, known worldwide as Avicii, is currently staying in a rehab clinic on Ibiza. He withdraws completely and focuses entirely on himself. In an email to Ash, which is part of the documents at hand, Tim describes for the first time how he perceives his situation. He writes that he is doing better, that he is beginning to understand where his anxiety comes from, and that he wants to change something. In his email, he describes that he is looking at his behavior in a new way, that he recognizes why he procrastinates, avoids decisions, and withdraws from situations. He explains that these patterns play an important role in his development and that they are closely linked to his anxiety. He describes a feeling of loss of control and at the same time, the attempt to regain control through withdrawal and avoidance. He begins to deal intensively with his own thoughts and writes that he increasingly recognizes how much they influence his experience. At this point, he reports that his condition is improving and that he wants to consciously continue this process. He has decided not to leave this place until he feels stable enough. But he also misses his team and the work. In addition, he expresses his gratitude to them. It seems like a clear turning point, a phase of realization, and a possible new beginning. But things take a different turn. In the months following his stay, Tim initially withdraws further and is difficult for those around him to reach. After several unsuccessful attempts to make contact, Ash writes an email. "Hi, since I'm not getting an answer, despite several attempts in every possible way, it's impossible for us to assign you work with deadlines. It feels like you're not really ready for that at the moment. That's completely okay." The signals were just a bit contradictory. The time for delivery is tight, and it will take several rounds of coordination to implement this according to the requirements. We'll coordinate with Klaus and see if we can solve this another way so that we can maintain the relationship between Avicii and Coca-Cola. I hope you're doing well. Regards, Ash Pournouri. But Tim needs some space. Together with musician friends from Sweden, he sets off on a journey through the American desert. A conscious decision to get away, gain some distance, and find new inspiration. The plan? From Malibu to Miami. 3 buses, music on the road, new ideas. And at first, it seems like that's exactly what's going to work. He's working on new tracks. The surroundings change, everyday life disappears. But at the end of this journey, a place awaits that reminds him of exactly what he actually wanted to break away from. The Ultra Music Festival in Miami, his first big performance after months of withdrawal. And as soon as he arrives, a feeling becomes noticeable that he knows from that time. Tension, doubt. While the car was driving towards Bayfront Park, Tim and Carl sent files back and forth to each other, edited them, and made final adjustments. As they approached the festival grounds, the noise of the crowd grew louder and louder. Tim hadn't been on a stage for more than 6 months and immediately recognized that rising tingling in his body. It was not a good feeling. "Tim, shit, how's it going?" asked Carl when they were back in the green room, surrounded by artists and roadies frantically preparing for the next performances. "I can't do this anymore," said Tim. "What do you mean?" "I just feel like I'm done with it, all these stares." I'm calling Ash and telling him I can't even look people in the eye anymore. No sooner said than done. Internally, Tim's sudden decision is being discussed. This arose from a rather sudden realization on Tim's part. He doesn't want to tour anymore. this isn't something you plan in 5 minutes, but we'll be in touch as soon as we have clarity and everything has been coordinated with Tim. The only thing I know and what we're going to do now, we're going to announce that he's stopping touring and try to make the best of the remaining shows. He wants to cancel the September dates in Vegas. I'm checking if this is possible without major financial damage. As for the financial planning, I don't know what you expect from us. As it looks, we're the biggest financial losers because we have no other choice but to support him. According to Tim himself, money plays no role for him. Regarding the performances, I understood that Tim wants to quit, but I assumed he'd still fulfill the shows already booked. What's new to me is that he also wants to cancel the September dates in Las Vegas. I understand you, Arash. This isn't what anyone wanted. But if performing has such a negative impact on his health, we can only support his decision. A reaction from Ash follows, which stands in sharp contrast to the image conveyed later in the documentary True Stories. High class, I don't think you understand. Tim would like to cancel everything. I made it clear to him that this will have significant financial consequences from all directions. Mainly because we practically begged him not to say he was ready when he actually wasn't. But he insisted that he was doing well, that he wanted to work again. It was even close to us canceling Ultra, and he would have been ready to blame others even though he himself was late. This is serious. He doesn't want to perform anymore. And we have no interest in forcing him or taking over the work for him. As stressful as all this is, I'm also relieved at the same time to no longer be held responsible for something that's been dysfunctional for a long time. I think Tim needs a real break to find out what's important to him and what opportunities he wants to use. As I said, we stand behind him and support his decisions no matter what. On March 29, 2016, Avicii officially announces his retirement from the stage. In his statement, however, he also announces he would still complete his 2016 tour. The documents at hand now paint the following picture in retrospect. After his stay in rehab, Tim decides to leave the clinic early. From his own perspective, because he's doing better and wants to work again. In coordination with those around him, new plans for 2016 are then developed. But the situation doesn't remain stable. After his gig at the Ultra Music Festival, he wants to cancel the planned performances again. Ash explains the possible consequences to him, especially the economic ones. At the same time, his email also indicates that he doesn't want to force Tim into anything. This portrayal stands in stark contrast to the image conveyed later in the documentary True Stories. There, it seems as if the pressure from the outside was decisive, and as if further performances were still being planned for him, even though he no longer wanted them. I got a lot of resistance when I wanted to stop doing the shows, says Tim. He had expected understanding and support, and not that they would continue to push him. Within the team, great efforts are being made during this phase to find a solution. It's being carefully analyzed which performances can be cancelled and which must remain due to existing contracts. But despite these adjustments, the situation remains unpredictable. Several performances are cancelled at short notice, sometimes without prior consultation. In certain phases, Tim is hardly reachable for those around him. At the same time, the cancellation of a single performance can cause costs in the millions. The situation is thus developing into a permanent burden for the team and for the entire organization behind the project. Throughout the entire summer, the situation remains tense. An internal email makes it clear that it's less about the question of whether he can stop, but about the consequences of this decision. Management emphasizes that the shows were originally based on his own decisions. Tim, since you've decided for several months now not to speak with me directly, I'm writing everything down so you can read it. So far, it's about lost gross revenue in the amount of $29.55 million US. For us, that means a loss of $5.9 million US in management fees alone. You can, of course, decide to cancel shows if you don't want to play them, but then you have to bear the consequences of your decisions. No one forced you to book shows. On the contrary, we helped you get out of bookings when we saw that it wasn't working. I told you that there was no pressure and that nothing else was booked. We cleared everything out so that you could have some peace. Those were your own decisions. No one else made them. Several people were in the room when I asked you not to book unless you were 100% sure that you could go through with it. I really hadn't actually expected you to quit this year, but I supported your decision anyway. It's costing me so much money specifically that I don't know how I'm going to survive this. On August 28, 2016, Avicii takes the stage at Ushuaia in Ibiza for the very last time. This performance marks the end of not only a phase of his career, but also his collaboration with his longtime management. A few months later, the relationship is dissolved by mutual contractual agreement. Ash receives a severance payment and signs a non-disclosure agreement. In October 2017, the documentary Avicii True Stories is released. For many, it becomes the definitive source for understanding what happened during those years. But even before its release, there are internal objections to the portrayal. Internal emails make it clear that parts of the material had not been cleared, and that, in particular, the portrayal of the management had not been agreed upon. I've spoken with our lawyers. They are not allowed to show me and my team in the film at all. A large part of the material they used has not been cleared. Apparently, no involvement or statement is provided. The documentary is nevertheless released without all perspectives being included. With its release, a certain image takes hold. An image that, for many, becomes reality. After Tim's death in April 2018, this perception is further reinforced. Questions are asked, connections are sought, and responsibility is discussed. A clear narrative is taking hold among parts of the public. A narrative that also includes his management at the time. Massive public criticism ensues, and in some cases it turns into personal attacks. I've never hated someone I don't know as much as I hate Ash Pournouri and his team after watching the documentary. You are the reason for Avicii's death. Blood on your hands. I hope you die soon, preferably a painful death. I wouldn't go out this week if I were you. The former number, which is the address. Over several years, Ash asks Tim's family to publicly contextualize the portrayal and correct his image. Just so I know, class, and don't get my hopes up for nothing, will the family ever officially tell the truth? We've already talked about it a few times. About the fact that the documentary doesn't tell the truth about me. However, in his view, no such clarification is forthcoming. Ultimately, this development also leads to legal action starting in 2024. In a lawyer's letter, it is argued, among other things, that the portrayal in the documentary does not match the actual events, and that the selection and careful editing of the material as presented in the final version created a rather one-sided picture, one that gives the strong impression that Ash bore a central and primary responsibility. At the same time, it is claimed that the use of certain material occurred without consent and violated contractually agreed confidentiality. That a portrayal became a narrative that continues to shape public perception to this day, even when the reality is more complex. After the end of his career as a touring DJ, Tim's life is rather quiet. The big performances disappear and the pressure from outside decreases. At times, he stays in Stockholm to produce music. During this time, he also meets his former manager, Ash, again. During his stay in Stockholm, Tim took the opportunity to also meet Arash Pournouri. He had realized how much he missed his former partner as someone to talk to. And mind you, not just that, he missed Arash as a person. Tim and Arash sat together and talked as Friday night turned into Saturday morning and the sun slowly began to rise over the bay outside. When they parted at around 5 in the morning, they agreed on how much they meant to each other and that they would soon hear from each other again. Tim is now dealing intensely with himself. He trains and meditates, sometimes for unusually long periods. His therapist views this development somewhat skeptically. If exercise and meditation gave Tim inner peace, that was great. But the therapist felt that the basis for better well-being was much simpler, namely something as basic as staying sober. Tim was using mind-expanding mushrooms at his home in Los Angeles and was apparently smoking a lot of pot. Relative to opioids, marijuana could sound innocent, but in fact cannabis was a risk factor when it came to psychosis. The ability to interpret reality would falter during a psychosis or be completely knocked out of play. Tim's conflicts now shift from the stage to his own thoughts. He is searching for answers, for an understanding of himself and for life as a whole. On April 20th, 2018, Tim Bergling dies in Oman. His death raises many questions in the years that follow, questions that remain unanswered and lead to speculations and myths making their way through confirmed and verifiable information. A rumor stating that Tim was staying at a royal estate at the time of his death was confirmed on both the German and English Wikipedia pages. Both sites merely refer to secondary sources, such as Rolling Stone. This source, however, in turn refers to the original article in Aftonbladet in which this information appears for the first time. The article is from April 26, 2018, and it says the following. Ahmed El-Belushi, an employee of Attorney General Nasir al-Rahabi in the capital Muscat, receives Aftonbladet in his office. Under a large portrait of the head of state, Sultan Qaboos bin Said, he clicks on a police document and reads the content on his screen. According to this, Tim Bergling died on an estate a few kilometers outside of Muscat. He was found dead in a house there, he says. The estate belongs to a relative of the Omani Sultan. We're heading there. The following information can be taken from the official biography. On April 19th, on a Thursday afternoon, Klaas's cell phone rang. It was a number he didn't recognize. The man on the other end introduced himself as a mayor and explained that he had accompanied the group during the desert expedition in Oman. He and Tim had met in the tent camps, he continued. Since the Swede wanted to stay in the country longer after the trip, he invited him to spend a few nights at his family's estate, a property west of Muscat. Tim was staying in a guest house with a small terrace that looked out onto the garden and the pergola. Furthermore, it becomes clear that Amer was apparently the tour guide for the mentioned desert expedition. The available sources describe the location from different perspectives. While media reports speak of an estate owned by a relative of the Sultan, the official biography describes a local contact, a tour guide, who invites Tim to his family's estate after the desert expedition. A clear connection between these details is not established. Whether it is the same person cannot be proven based on the information available. Another rumor that persists to this day is the so-called murder and trafficking documentary theory. It states that Tim's death was not a suicide, but a murder, in connection with an alleged documentary titled The Silent Children, which he is said to have worked on together with other deceased celebrities. However, there is no verifiable evidence for this theory. In the meantime, it has been checked and refuted by both Reuters and PolitiFact. Its spread can be explained primarily by two factors: the initial lack of detailed official information on the cause of death, as well as the family's extensive silence. Meanwhile, the family has made a clear statement on the Tim Bergling Foundation website, where they speak of suicide. In the course of the release of documents from the current lawsuit, another claim is also being circulated. It has been picked up by the website Culture, among others, in an article that summarizes the central contents of the documents. In it, it is claimed that Tim's brothers were already in Oman on the day of his death and had lunch with him on that very same day. While this statement is found in the lawsuit, the underlying case file contains no document that supports this account. What remains are numerous narratives, some of them proven, others not. And often it is precisely the lack of clarity that creates room for new theories. Between documented facts and repeated claims, a picture emerges that changes over time. A picture that is shaped not only by what actually happened, but also by how it is spoken about. And that is exactly where the real challenge lies, to distinguish between what is proven and what is told.